The Cave by Clifton Andrew Mather. Copyright 2026. Chapter 1. The Fall of Aramore. Night did not fall on Aramore. It collapsed. The sky glowed red long before the sun disappeared, as if the heavens themselves were burning. Smoke rolled across the valley in thick, choking waves. The capital, once the pride of the kingdom, was now a silhouette of fire and ruin. Banners lay trampled in the mud. Horses screamed. Steel clashed. Men who once trained side by side now cut each other down without hesitation. Eldros stood on the ridge above the capital, his armor dented, his breath ragged, his sword dripping with the blood of men he once trusted. The wind tore at his cloak, carrying the scent of burning timber and betrayal. He had never seen a kingdom die before. Behind him, the last loyal knights fled in scattered groups, some running, some limping, some simply collapsing from exhaustion. Their discipline was gone, their unity shattered, their king dead. Eldros did not run. Not yet. He watched the capital burn, jaw clenched, heart pounding like a war drum. He had sworn an oath to defend this land. He had sworn to protect the king. He had sworn to stand until death. But the king was gone. The kingdom was gone. And the men who destroyed it wore the same armor he did. A horse thundered up behind him. "Eldros, we have to move!" a young knight shouted, panic cracking his voice. "They're coming up the ridge!" Eldros didn't turn. "Who? Everyone. Traitors, rebels, mercenaries, I don't know. The whole kingdom's gone mad." Eldros finally looked back. The knight was barely 20, soot streaking his face, eyes wide with terror. Behind him, a dozen more stumbled up the slope, wounded, bleeding, broken. "Where's Vandrick?" Eldros asked. The young knight shook his head. "I saw him fighting near the eastern gate. After that, nothing." Eldros exhaled slowly. Vandrick was one of the few men he trusted, quiet, sharp-eyed, deadly. If anyone could survive the fall of a kingdom, it was him. But Eldros had no time to search. The ridge trembled with the sound of approaching riders. "Move!" Eldros barked. "Into the mountains, now!" The knights obeyed, scattering into the narrow trail that led toward the northern peaks. Eldros followed last, glancing once more at the burning capital. He whispered a prayer, not for the king, not for the traitors, but for the innocent who would suffer in the days to come. Then he turned and ran. The flight into the mountains. The trail was steep and unforgiving. Roots tore at their boots, stones shifted underfoot. The forest swallowed them in darkness. Arrows hissed past their heads, shouts echoed behind them. Torches flickered through the trees. One knight fell with a cry, an arrow buried in his back. Another collapsed from exhaustion. Another simply vanished into the shadows. By the time they reached the foothills, only a handful remained. And then the group split. Some fled east, some west. Some climbed higher into the mountains. Eldros chose the highest path, the one that led into the cold, jagged peaks where few dared to travel. He didn't know who else had taken this route. He didn't know if any allies remained. He didn't know if Vandrick was alive. But he knew one thing. He would not die in the valley like an animal. He would not be hunted down like prey. He would survive, and he would find purpose again, even if he had to carve it from stone. The shadow behind him. Hours passed. The moon rose high, casting pale light across the mountainside. Eldros moved silently, sword drawn, senses sharp. The forest was quiet now, too quiet. He wasn't alone. He could feel it. A presence moved behind him, matching his steps, keeping its distance. Eldros stopped. The presence stopped. He moved again. It moved again. He tightened his grip on his sword. "Show yourself," he growled. No answer. But the presence did not retreat. It followed, always just out of sight, always just beyond the trees. Eldros didn't know who it was, a traitor, a survivor, a hunter, but whoever followed him would eventually have to face him. And Eldros would be ready. The cave. Near midnight, the temperature dropped sharply. Frost clung to the rocks. The wind howled through the peaks like a wounded beast. Eldros found a narrow cave entrance hidden behind a curtain of hanging roots. He slipped inside, sword raised, eyes adjusting to the darkness. The cave was deep. Cold, silent. A perfect place to rest, a perfect place to die. He moved deeper, listening to the echo of his footsteps. Then he heard it. A second set of footsteps. Soft, controlled, deliberate. The presence had followed him inside. Eldros turned, blade raised. A silhouette stepped into the faint moonlight, tall, broad-shouldered, silent, Vandrick, alive. But his sword was drawn, and his eyes were filled with the same suspicion Eldros felt. Neither man spoke, neither lowered his blade. The cave held its breath, and the kingdom's last two righteous knights stared at each other like strangers, enemies, or something worse. Chapter 2. The Fight in the Dark. The cave swallowed the moonlight as Eldros and Vandrick faced each other, two silhouettes carved from exhaustion and suspicion. Their breaths echoed off the stone walls, slow and controlled, the breaths of men who had survived too much to trust easily. Vandrick's voice broke the silence first, low and steady. "You followed me?" Eldros didn't lower his blade. "You followed me?" A faint smirk tugged at Vandrick's mouth. "If I wanted you dead, Eldros, you wouldn't have heard me." "And if I wanted you dead," Eldros replied, "you wouldn't be standing." The cave held its breath. Two men, two swords, two survivors of a kingdom that no longer existed. Vandrick stepped forward, steel catching a sliver of moonlight. "We don't have to do this." Eldros tightened his grip. "Then lower your blade." "You first." "No." A long silence. Then Vandrick exhaled. A slow, tired breath, and lowered his sword. Eldros didn't. Not yet. Vandrick raised an eyebrow. "Fair." Eldros finally lowered his blade, but neither sheathed it. The first strike, a drop of water fell from the ceiling. It hit stone, the sound echoed, and in that instant Vandrick moved. Fast, silent, deadly. Steel flashed. Eldros barely parried in time, sparks bursting between them. Vandrick pressed forward, his strikes sharp and precise, each one aimed to kill. Eldros countered with raw strength, forcing Vandrick back step by step. "You attacked first," Eldros growled. "You hesitated," Vandrick shot back. Their blades clashed again and again, the sound ringing through the cave like thunder. Dust fell from the ceiling. Loose stones shifted under their boots. Vandrick ducked under a swing and drove his shoulder into Eldros's chest, slamming him against the wall. Eldros grunted, shoved him off, and swung hard enough to split a shield. Vandrick dodged by inches. "You fight like a man with nothing left to lose," Eldros said. "I fight like a man who refuses to die in a cave," Vandrick replied. Their swords locked, their faces inches apart, their breaths hot and ragged. Then Vandrick twisted, breaking the lock, and slashed at Eldros's leg. Eldros jumped back, stumbled, and Vandrick lunged. Eldros rolled aside, grabbed a loose stone and hurled it. It struck Vandrick's shoulder. Vandrick snarled and charged. Eldros met him head-on. They crashed to the ground, swords skittering across the stone floor. Now it was fists, elbows, knees, raw survival. Vandrick landed a punch that split Eldros's lip. Eldros drove his knee into Vandrick's ribs. Vandrick slammed Eldros's head against the ground. Eldros rolled, reversed their positions, and pinned Vandrick with his forearm across his throat. Vandrick struggled. Eldros pressed harder. "Yield!" Eldros growled. Vandrick's hand reached for a fallen dagger. Eldros grabbed his wrist and slammed it against the stone. "Yield!" Vandrick's breath rasped. His strength faltered. Finally he exhaled. "I yield!" Eldros released him and rolled away, chest heaving. For a long moment neither man moved, only their breathing filled the cave. The realization. Vandrick sat up slowly, rubbing his throat. "You fight like a man who's lost everything." Eldros wiped blood from his mouth. "I have. So have I." Silence settled between them. Not hostile, not warm, but something in between. Something that felt like the beginning of understanding. Vandrick looked at him. "You could have killed me. You could have killed me. Why didn't you?" Eldros shrugged. "Didn't feel right." Vandrick nodded. "Same." They sat in silence again, listening to the distant drip of water. Finally Vandrick spoke. "We're not enemies, Eldros." Eldros didn't answer. Vandrick continued. "We fought the same traitors, we bled for the same king, we lost the same kingdom." Eldros looked at him. "Then why did we fight?" Vandrick smirked. "Because we're stubborn," Eldros almost smiled. "That we are deeper into the cave." They retrieved their swords and moved deeper into the cave, the air growing colder, the walls narrowing. Water dripped from the ceiling in slow, rhythmic taps. Vandrick broke the silence. "Where were you headed?" "North," Eldros said. "Into the mountains." "Same." Eldros glanced at him. "Why?" Because the mountains don't lie, Vandrick said. Men do. Eldros nodded. Fair enough. The tunnel widened suddenly, opening into a vast chamber lit by faint blue light reflecting off mineral veins in the stone. Eldros stopped. Vandrick stepped beside him. What is this place? Vandrick whispered. Eldros shook his head. Not a natural cave. They moved forward cautiously, swords raised. In the center of the chamber lay a mound of earth, unnaturally smooth, as if shaped by human hands long ago. Vandrick knelt and brushed away dust. Someone buried something here. Eldros joined him. Help me dig. They dug with their hands until their fingers bled. Then Eldros struck wood, a chest, old, heavy, bound in iron. Vandrick looked at him. Open it. Eldros lifted the lid. Inside lay 10 bags of gold, 2 bags of diamonds, 2 bags of rubies, 10 masterwork swords, 10 smaller swords, 10 knives, and a single ancient parchment. Vandrick lifted the parchment carefully. The ink was faded, but legible. He read aloud. 2 will find this, and become brothers. 3 more will join the circle. The words echoed through the chamber like a whisper from the past. Eldros stared at Vandrick. Vandrick stared back. Neither spoke. But both felt the same thing. This was not coincidence. This was not chance. This was something older. Something waiting for them. Chapter 3. The Three Who Entered the Dark. The chamber was silent after Eldros finished reading the prophecy aloud. Silent in a way that felt alive. The faint blue glow from the mineral veins shimmered across the stone walls, casting long shadows behind the 2 men. Eldros and Vandrick stood over the open chest, their breaths slow, their minds racing. 2 will find this and become brothers. 3 more will join the circle. Eldros closed the parchment carefully. This was meant for us. Vandrick nodded. And for 3 others. Eldros looked at him. Do you believe in prophecy? Vandrick shrugged. I believe in timing. And this is too perfect to ignore. Eldros almost smiled. You always were the practical one. And you were always the stubborn one. Their eyes met, not as enemies, not as rivals, but as men who had bled together, fought each other, and somehow survived both. A sound echoed from the tunnel behind them. Footsteps, slow, measured, not hiding, but not rushing either. Eldros and Vandrick exchanged a glance. Vandrick whispered, 3 more. Eldros nodded. Or 3 enemies. They drew their swords. The arrival. 3 silhouettes appeared at the mouth of the chamber. The first was tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the confidence of a man who had seen battle and survived it. The second was leaner, sharp-eyed, scanning the chamber with the precision of a strategist. The third was quiet, his presence steady, his gaze calm but unyielding. They stepped into the blue light. Eldros raised his sword. Stop there. The tall one lifted his hands slightly, not surrendering but showing he meant no harm. We're not here to fight. Vandrick's voice was cold. Everyone says that before they draw blood. The tall one nodded. Fair enough. Eldros studied them. Names. The tall one spoke first. Hadrin. The sharp-eyed one followed. Vandros. The quiet one last. Sovereign. Vandrick stepped forward. You survived the fall of Aramor? Hadrin nodded. Barely. We fled into the mountains, saw your tracks, followed them. Why? Eldros asked. Because we saw you fight, Hadrin said. And we saw you refuse to kneel. Men like that are rare. Vandrick exchanged a glance with Eldros. Eldros gestured to the chest. Come closer. The 3 approached slowly, eyes widening as they saw the treasure, the gold, the diamonds, the rubies, the weapons, the parchment. Vandros spoke first. What is this? Eldros handed him the parchment. Vandros read it aloud, his voice steady. 2 will find this and become brothers. 3 more will join the circle. The chamber fell silent again. Sovereign broke it. You think this refers to us? Vandrick answered. We don't think. We know. Hadrin crossed his arms. Prophecy or not, we're not thieves. If this belongs to you 2, it belongs to all 5 of us, Eldros said. The 3 men exchanged looks, confusion, disbelief, and something else. Hope, testing the 3. Eldros stepped closer, his voice low and commanding. Before we decide anything, we need to know who you are. Hadrin nodded. Ask. Eldros pointed at him. You first. Hadrin stood tall. I was a knight of the Western garrison. When the traitors rose, I held the gate as long as I could, lost my men, lost my captain, but I didn't run until the walls fell. Vandric nodded approvingly. Eldros turned to Vandros. And you? Vandros's eyes were sharp. I was a tactician under the king's command. I saw the betrayal coming, too late to stop it, but early enough to escape. I've been tracking enemy movements ever since. Eldros raised an eyebrow. You're a strategist. A good one, Vandros said simply. Sovereign stepped forward before Eldros could ask. I was a warden of the northern border. I kept the peace. I enforced the law. I protected the weak. And when the kingdom fell, I swore I would not let the world descend into chaos without a fight. Eldros studied him. You're disciplined, Sovereign nodded. And loyal. Vandric sheathed his sword. They're good men. Eldros sheathed his as well, yes. They are the decision. Eldros placed the parchment on the chest. This was meant for 5, not 2. Vandric stepped beside him. We fought each other. We bled. We survived. And now we stand here with you 3. Hadrin looked at the treasure. If we join you, what happens next? Eldros answered without hesitation. We become one group, move as one, think as one, live as one. Vandric added, and die as one if it comes to that. Sovereign nodded slowly. A brotherhood. Vandros looked at the parchment again. A circle. Eldros extended his hand. Stand with us. Hadrin placed his hand over Eldros's. Vandros placed his next. Sovereign placed his last. Vandric stepped forward and placed his hand on top. 5 hands, 5 men, 1 circle. The prophecy was fulfilled, dividing the treasure. They sat around the chest, the faint blue light shimmering across their faces. Vandric spoke first. We divided evenly. Eldros nodded. 1 bag of gold each, 2 swords each, 2 smaller swords, 2 knives. Hadrin frowned. And the rest? Vandric tapped the chest. I'll hold it. For the circle. Sovereign nodded. A treasury. Vandros smirked. You trust him with all that? Eldros answered. With my life. Vandric didn't smile, but his eyes softened. The first night as 5, they built a small fire in the chamber, the flames flickering against the stone walls. They spoke long into the night, about the fall of Aramor, about the traitors, about the future. Hadrin told stories of the Western garrison. Vandros spoke of strategies and maps. Sovereign spoke of justice and order. Vandric spoke little, but when he did, every man listened. Eldros listened most of all. By the time the fire burned low, something had changed. They were no longer 5 strangers. They were 5 brothers. The noise in the tunnel. Just as they began to drift toward sleep, a faint sound echoed from the tunnel. A distant rumble, a shifting of stone. Eldros sat up instantly. Did you hear that? Vandric was already on his feet. Something's coming. Hadrin grabbed his sword. More survivors? Sovereign shook his head. No, that's too heavy, Vandros whispered. Then what is it? Eldros stepped toward the tunnel, sword raised. Whatever it is, he said, we face it together. The circle rose as one. Chapter 4. The First Dawn of the Circle. The sound in the tunnel grew louder, a deep, grinding rumble, like stones shifting under its own weight. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The fire flickered. Every man in the chamber rose to his feet, hands on their weapons. Eldros stepped forward first, sword drawn. Vandric moved beside him, silent as a shadow. Hadrin, Vandros and Sovereign formed a line behind them. 5 men, 5 blades, 1 instinct, stand together. The rumble grew closer. Vandros whispered, cave in? Sovereign shook his head. No, something's moving. Hadrin tightened his grip on his sword. Then let it come. Eldros raised a hand, signaling silence. The tunnel darkened as something blocked the faint moonlight from the entrance. A shape, large, heavy, stumbled into view. A man, covered in dust, bleeding from the head, barely conscious. He collapsed at their feet. Eldros knelt instantly, turning the man over. He's alive. Vandric crouched beside him. A survivor. The man's eyes fluttered open. Help! Please! Eldros steadied him. Who did this? The man coughed, blood staining his lips. Traitors, hunting, everyone, no mercy. Hadrin's jaw tightened. He's one of ours. Sovereign knelt and checked the man's pulse. He won't last long. The man grabbed Eldros's wrist with surprising strength. Don't go back. They're killing. All knights. All loyal men. Eldros nodded. We won't go back. The man's grip loosened. His eyes closed. He was gone. A long silence filled the chamber. Vandric stood slowly. This confirms it. The kingdom isn't just fallen. It's being purged. Vandros exhaled sharply. Then we're the last. Sovereign looked at Eldros. What now? Eldros rose to his full height, the blue light casting a cold glow across his face. We move forward, he said. We build something new. Something righteous. Something that cannot be burned down by traitors. Hadrin nodded. A home, Vandric added. A stronghold, Vandros smirked. A place where men like us can stand without fear, Sovereign finished. A place worth defending. Eldros looked at each of them in turn. We are the circle now. 5 men bound by prophecy, by survival, and by choice. He placed his hand over his heart. And we will not die in a cave. The first plan. They gathered around the chest again, the treasure shimmering in the dim light. Vandric spoke first. We need horses, supplies, armor, weapons, everything. Hadrin nodded. And a place to build. Vandros knelt and drew a rough map in the dirt with his finger. There's a valley north of here, fertile, hidden, defensible. I've scouted it before. Sovereign leaned in. How far? 2 days' travel, Vandros said. If we move at dawn, Eldros nodded. Then that's where we go. Vandric tapped the chest. We divide what we agreed on. 1 bag of gold each. 2 swords. 2 smaller swords. 2 knives. Hadrin raised an eyebrow. And the rest? I'll hold it, Vandric said. For the circle. Sovereign nodded. A treasury, Vandros smirked. You trust him with all that? Eldros answered without hesitation. With my life. Vandric didn't smile, but his eyes softened. The oath of the 5. Before they slept, Eldros stood and faced the others. We need an oath, he said. Something that binds us. Hadrin rose. Speak it. Eldros looked at each man, Vandric, Hadrin, Vandros, Sovereign, and felt something he hadn't felt since the kingdom fell. Purpose. He spoke slowly, his voice echoing through the chamber. No man stands alone. Vandric repeated it. No man stands alone, Hadrin added. Not in battle. Vandros added. Not in hardship. Sovereign finished. Not in death. Eldros continued. We move as one. Vandric, we fight as one. Hadrin, we bleed as one. Vandros, we rise as one. Sovereign, we endure as one. Eldros placed his hand over the chest. And we build a future no traitor can destroy. The others placed their hands over his. 5 hands. 5 men. 1 circle. The oath was sealed. The first dawn. They slept in shifts, blades close, the fire burning low. When dawn finally crept into the chamber, pale and cold, Eldros was the first to rise. He walked to the tunnel entrance and looked out. The mountains were quiet. The sky was clear. The world felt new. Vandric stepped beside him. We survived the night. Eldros nodded. Now we build the day. Hadrin, Vandros and Sovereign joined them, each carrying their share of the treasure, their weapons strapped to their backs. Eldros looked at them. 5 men who had no kingdom, no home, no banner. But they had each other. Let's go, he said, and the circle stepped out of the cave into the cold morning light, ready to carve their future from the world. Chapter 5. The Road to the Valley. The morning air bit at their faces as the 5 men stepped out of the cave. Frost clung to the rocks. The wind cut through their cloaks. But the sky was clear, a cold, bright blue that felt like a promise. Eldros stood at the front, scanning the mountainside. Vandric moved beside him, silent and watchful. Hadrin, Vandros and Sovereign followed, each carrying their share of the treasure. The world felt empty, quiet, dangerous. But for the first time since the kingdom fell, Eldros felt something steady in his chest. Direction. He turned to the others. We move north. Stay close. Stay sharp. Vandric nodded. We move as one. Hadrin smirked. We fight as one. Vandros added. We rise as one. Sovereign finished. We endure as one. The circle began their march. The descent. The path down the mountain was narrow and treacherous. Loose stones shifted under their boots. The wind howled through the peaks, carrying the distant cries of birds or something else. Hadrin glanced back at the cave. Hard to believe we almost died in there, Vandrick replied without looking back. Harder to believe we lived. Sovereign adjusted the straps on his pack. We were meant to... Vandros raised an eyebrow. You believe in prophecy now? Sovereign shrugged. I believe in purpose. Eldros spoke over his shoulder. Purpose is enough. They continued down the slope, moving in silence for a time. The mountains stretched endlessly around them, jagged peaks, deep ravines, forests thick with shadows. Vandrick scanned the tree line. We're being watched. Hadrin's hand went to his sword. By who? Not men, Vandrick said. Animals, wolves maybe. Eldros nodded. Let them watch. We're not prey. Vandros chuckled. Speak for yourself. I'm delicious, Hadrin snorted. You're too skinny to be worth eating. Sovereign shook his head. Both of you are fools. Eldros allowed himself a small smile. The banter felt good. Human, alive. The first threat. They reached a narrow pass between two cliffs. The wind died suddenly, replaced by an eerie stillness. Vandrick raised a hand. Stop! The circle froze. Eldros whispered, What is it? Vandrick pointed to the ground. Tracks. Hadrin knelt. Men? No, Vandrick said. Wolves. A large pack. Vandros frowned. How large? Vandrick stood. Large enough. Sovereign drew his sword. Then we move quickly. They entered the pass, weapons ready. The cliffs rose high on either side, blocking the sun. Shadows stretched across the path like long, dark fingers. A low growl echoed from the rocks. Hadrin turned. Left side, another growl. Right side. Vandros whispered. They're surrounding us. Eldros stepped forward, sword raised. Hold the line. The wolves emerged from the shadows, lean, hungry, their eyes glowing in the dim light. A dozen of them, maybe more. Vandrick muttered. I hate wolves. Hadrin grinned. I don't. The wolves circled closer. Eldros shouted, Circle formation! The 5 men moved instantly, backs together, blades outward, a perfect ring of steel. The first wolf lunged. Hadrin met it with a brutal downward strike, splitting it cleanly. Another wolf leapt at Vandrick. He sidestepped and drove his blade through its ribs. Sovereign parried a bite and kicked the wolf backward. Vandros slashed another across the throat. Eldros fought like a man carved from stone, precise, controlled, deadly. The wolves circled again, snarling, blood dripping from their jaws. Vandrick whispered, They're testing us. Eldros replied, Then let them learn. The wolves attacked again. This time the circle moved as one. Hadrin blocked, Vandrick countered, Vandros flanked, Sovereign struck. Eldros finished. In moments the pass was silent again, the wolves lay still. The circle stood unbroken. Hadrin wiped his blade. Well, that was refreshing. Vandros laughed. Speak for yourself, I'm exhausted. Sovereign sheathed his sword. We need to keep moving. Eldros nodded. We're close. The valley. By late afternoon the mountains opened into a wide overlook. The 5 men stepped to the edge and stared down at the land below. A valley stretched out before them, green, fertile, protected by natural ridges on all sides. A river cut through the center, shimmering in the sunlight. Forests bordered the edges. The land was untouched, wild, waiting. Vandros spoke first. This is it. Hadrin nodded. A place to build. Sovereign crossed his arms. A place to defend. Vandrick stepped forward, eyes scanning every detail. A place to call home. Eldros felt something stir in his chest, something he hadn't felt since before the kingdom fell. Hope. He turned to the others. This valley will be ours. The wind carried his words across the mountains. Hadrin placed a hand on Eldros's shoulder. Then let's make it worthy of the circle, Vandros smirked. And worthy of the prophecy. Sovereign nodded. And worthy of the men who will come after us. Vandrick looked at Eldros. Lead the way. Eldros stepped forward, his voice steady. Tomorrow we begin. Chapter 6. The Lion's Mark. The valley was quiet when the circle descended into it at dawn. Mist clung to the grass. The river shimmered like a silver blade cutting through the land. Birds stirred in the trees. The world felt untouched, as if waiting for the right hands to shape it. Eldros stood at the front, boots sinking into the soft earth. Vandrick moved beside him, scanning the horizon. Hadrin, Vandros and Sovereign followed, each carrying their share of the treasure. The valley stretched wide and open, protected by natural ridges on all sides. A perfect place for a beginning. Eldros exhaled slowly. This is where it starts, Vandrik nodded. Where we build, Hadrin grinned. Where we rise, Vandros smirked. Where we don't starve, Sovereign added. Where we stand. The circle walked deeper into the valley. The first camp. They chose a spot near the river, flat ground, good visibility, fresh water. Vandrik and Eldros gathered wood while Hadrin and Sovereign cleared brush. Vandros sketched rough plans in the dirt with a stick. By midday they had a fire burning and a temporary shelter built from branches and hides. Hadrin stretched his arms. Feels good to build something instead of running. Vandrik nodded. Running is for men without purpose. Vandros looked up from his drawings. Speaking of purpose, we need a symbol. Eldros raised an eyebrow. A symbol? For the circle, Vandros said. For the men who will follow us. For the village we'll build. Sovereign crossed his arms. What did you have in mind? Vandros pointed to Eldros. He should choose. Eldros blinked. Why me? Hadrin answered. Because you lead. Vandrik added. Because you won the fight. Sovereign finished. Because you carry the weight. Eldros looked at them. 4 men who had chosen him without hesitation. 4 men who trusted him with their lives. He knelt and drew in the dirt. A lion, strong, steadfast, unyielding. The others gathered around. Hadrin nodded. A lion. I like it. Vandros grinned. Bold, Sovereign said, fitting. Vandrik placed a hand on Eldros's shoulder. It suits you. Eldros looked at the symbol, the first mark of their future. This will be our banner, he said. Our identity. Our oath. Vandrik nodded. The lion's circle, the journey to the town. The next morning they set out toward the nearest town, a half-day's walk from the valley. They needed horses, armor, supplies, and information. The road was quiet, the air warm, the sun rising behind them. Hadrin walked beside Eldros. Think the town survived the fall? Some towns always do, Eldros said. Too small to matter. Too far to burn, Vandros added, and too stubborn to die. Sovereign scanned the tree line. We stay cautious. Desperate men do desperate things. Vandrik walked slightly ahead, silent, alert. When they reached the outskirts of the town, they saw smoke rising, not from destruction, but from chimneys. People moved through the streets. Merchants opened stalls. Life continued. Hadrin exhaled. Good. We can work with this, Vandrik murmured. Stay sharp. They entered the town. The blacksmith. The blacksmith's forge was loud and hot, sparks flying as a hammer struck glowing metal. The blacksmith, a broad man with arms like tree trunks, looked up as the 5 approached. You boys look like you crawled out of a war, he said. Eldros replied. We did. The blacksmith grunted. Then you'll be needing repairs. Vandrik stepped forward. We need more than repairs. We need armor reforged, 5 sets. And we want a symbol added. The blacksmith raised an eyebrow. A symbol? Eldros drew the lion in the dirt. The blacksmith stared at it for a long moment. A lion, he said. Strong choice. Hadrin grinned. We're strong men. The blacksmith smirked. We'll see. Vandrik placed a bag of gold on the anvil. This should cover it. The blacksmith's eyes widened. Where in the hells did you get that? Eldros answered. We earned it. The blacksmith nodded slowly. Then I'll give you my best work, buying the horses. Next they went to the stables. The stable master, a wiry man with sharp eyes, watched them approach. You looking to buy? He asked. Yes, Eldros said. 5 horses. Strong ones. The stable master whistled. That'll cost you. Vandrik tossed him a small pouch of gold. We can pay. The stable master opened it, eyes widening. You're serious? Very, Vandrik said. The stable master led them to the best horses he had, tall, muscular, well-trained. Hadrin stroked the neck of a dark brown stallion. This one's mine. Vandros chose a grey mare. Fast. I like her. Sovereign picked a black stallion. Strong. Vandrik chose a chestnut horse with sharp eyes. Smart. Eldros approached a white stallion with a scar across its muzzle. The horse stared at him, unblinking. Eldros placed a hand on its neck. This one, the stable master nodded. He's stubborn. Eldros smirked. So am I. The first followers. As they prepared to leave, a group of men approached, rough, tired, armed. One of them stepped forward. We saw you buy horses, saw your armor, heard you talking about building something. Eldros studied them. And? We want in, the man said. We're knights, or we were, loyal to the king, loyal to the kingdom. But now, We have nowhere to go. Vandrik looked at Eldros. Eldros looked at the men. How many of you? 25. Hadrin whistled. That's a small army. Sovereign crossed his arms. Can they fight? The man nodded. We survived the fall. That should tell you enough. Vandros smirked. He's got a point. Eldros stepped forward. If you join us, you follow our rules, our unity, our purpose. The man nodded. We will. Eldros extended his hand. Then welcome to the circle. The man clasped it. 25 knights bowed their heads. The circle had grown. Chapter 7. The first 25. The 25 knights followed the circle out of the town like shadows, quiet, disciplined, hardened by loss. Their armor was dented, their cloaks torn, their faces worn by exhaustion and grief. But their eyes held something alive. Hope. Eldros rode at the front on his white stallion, the scar-muzzled beast moving with a proud, steady gait. Vandrik rode beside him, chestnut horse alert and sharp-eyed. Behind them, Hadrin, Vandros and Sovereign led the growing column of men. The road stretched long and dusty beneath the morning sun. Hadrin glanced back at the 25. They look rough, Vandros smirked. Rough is good, rough men survive. Sovereign nodded. Rough men build, Vandrik added. Rough men follow strength. Eldros kept his eyes forward. Then let's give them something worth following. The march back to the valley. The journey back to the valley took the rest of the day. The knights marched in tight formation, their boots thudding in unison. Birds scattered from the trees as they passed. The river glimmered beside them, guiding their path. One of the knights, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, approached Eldros. Sir, he said, may I speak? Eldros nodded. Speak. We heard rumors, the man said. Rumors that you 5 found something in the mountains. Something important. Vandrik's eyes narrowed. Rumors travel fast. The man raised his hands. We're not asking for treasure. We're asking for purpose. Eldros studied him. What's your name? Ronan. Ronan, Eldros said. What do you want? Ronan swallowed. A place to stand. A place to fight for. A place where loyalty still means something. Eldros nodded slowly. Then you're in the right company. Ronan bowed his head and fell back into formation. Vandrik leaned closer to Eldros. They're looking to you, Eldros replied. They're looking to us. Vandrik didn't argue. The valley revealed. When they reached the ridge overlooking the valley, the 25 knights stopped in awe. The land stretched wide and green, the river cutting through it like a silver blade. The forests were thick, the hills protective, the soil rich. Hadrin grinned. Look at their faces, Vandros chuckled. They've never seen anything like it. Sovereign crossed his arms. Neither have we, Vandrik spoke quietly. This is where we build. Eldros raised his voice so all could hear. Men of Aramor, this valley is ours now, not by conquest, not by inheritance, but by choice. The knights listened, breath held. We build here, we train here, we rise here. He pointed toward the river. Tonight we make camp. Tomorrow we begin. The valley echoed with the sound of 25 men cheering. The first camp of 30. They descended into the valley and set up a massive camp near the river. Fires were lit, tents were raised, water was drawn. The circle moved among the men, giving orders, offering guidance, establishing structure. Hadrin oversaw the building of fire pits. Sovereign organized the watch rotations. Vandros sketched the first layout of the future village. Vandrik inspected weapons and armor. Eldros walked the perimeter, studying the land. As the sun dipped behind the ridges, the camp glowed with firelight. The smell of cooking meat filled the air. Laughter, real laughter, rose among the men for the first time since the kingdom fell. Eldros returned to the center of camp, where the circle sat around a large fire. Hadrin handed him a piece of roasted meat. Eat, you've been pacing like a wolf. Eldros took it. I'm thinking, Vandros smirked. Dangerous, Sovereign asked. What's on your mind? Eldros looked at the fire. We have 30 men now. But 30 men alone cannot build a village. Vandrik nodded. We'll need more. Hadrin leaned forward. How many? Eldros answered. Enough to defend what we build. Enough to build what we defend. Vandros tapped the dirt with a stick. 50? 100? Sovereign shook his head. Not yet. We need structure first. Vandrick agreed. We need a headquarters, a place to plan, a place to lead. Eldros nodded. Stone walls, stone rooms, a stronghold. Hadrin grinned. Now you're speaking my language. The circle's first command. Eldros stood and raised his voice. Men of Aramor. The camp fell silent. You followed us here. You trusted us. Now we begin the work that will define us. He pointed to the valley. Tomorrow we start building. Not a camp, not a shelter, a village, a home. The knights murmured with excitement. Eldros continued. We will build walls, we will build a headquarters. We will build a place where no traitor can ever reach us. Vandrick stepped beside him. And we will build it together. Hadrin added. With our hands. Vandros added. With our strength. Sovereign added. With our unity. Eldros finished. We are the circle. And this valley is the beginning of our future. The knights erupted in cheers. The night before the work. As the camp settled, Eldros walked alone to the river. The moon reflected off the water, turning it silver. Vandrick joined him quietly. You spoke well, Vandrick said. Eldros shrugged. I spoke truth. Vandrick nodded. They believe in you. Eldros looked at him. And you? Vandrick smirked. I follow you because you lead. They follow you because you inspire. Eldros shook his head. We lead together. Vandrick's voice softened. Closer than brothers. Eldros looked at him, really looked at him, and nodded. Yes, closer than brothers. The river flowed quietly beside them. Tomorrow the work would begin. Tomorrow the valley would change. Tomorrow the circle would take its first step toward becoming a legend. Chapter 8. The First Foundations. Dawn broke over the valley like a slow rising fire. Mist drifted across the grass. The river shimmered. Birdsong echoed through the trees. And 30 men stood ready. Eldros walked to the center of camp, the lion symbol freshly carved into a wooden plank at his side. Vandrick, Hadrin, Vandros and Sovereign joined him, each carrying tools, rope or weapons. The 25 knights formed a semicircle around them, silent, waiting. Eldros raised his voice. Today, we begin the work that will define us. The men straightened. We build not for a king, not for a kingdom, but for each other. Vandrick stepped forward. We build a home, Hadrin added, a stronghold. Vandros added, a future. Sovereign finished. A place where loyalty still lives. Eldros lifted the wooden plank. This is our mark. The lion's head stared back at them, fierce, unyielding, carved with purpose. This symbol will hang over our gates. It will be stamped on our armor. It will be the banner men follow into battle. The knights murmured with approval. Eldros drove the plank into the ground. Let the work begin, the first tasks. The circle divided the men into groups. Hadrin's crew clearing land. Hadrin led 10 men to the northern side of the valley, where thick brush and fallen trees blocked the ground. His voice boomed across the field. Axes up! Swing like you mean it! The men chopped, dragged, and burned brush until sweat soaked their tunics. Sovereign's crew, perimeter and security. Sovereign walked the outer edges of the valley with 8 men, marking where the future wall would stand. He placed stones at intervals, measuring distance with the precision of a soldier. No gaps, he said. No blind spots. This place will be a fortress. Vandros's crew, planning and layout. Vandros knelt in the dirt with 7 men, drawing lines, circles, and measurements. The headquarters goes here, he said, pointing to a raised patch of ground. Stone foundation, multiple rooms. A central hall. One knight asked, why here? Elevation, Vandros said. Visibility, defense. The men nodded. Eldros and Vandrick, overseeing everything. The two walked the valley, checking progress, offering guidance, and ensuring unity. Vandrick spoke quietly as they walked. They're working hard. They believe in this, Eldros said. They believe in you. Eldros shook his head. They believe in us. Vandrick didn't argue. The first conflict. By midday the sun beat down hard. Sweat dripped, muscles burned, tempers rose, a shout broke the rhythm. 2 knights, Roran and Just, stood chest to chest, faces red, fists clenched. You're swinging that axe like a child, Roran barked. And you're giving orders like your captain, Just snapped. Hadrin stormed over. Enough! But the men didn't stop. Roran shoved Just. Just swung a fist. The two crashed to the ground, rolling in the dirt. Hadrin grabbed Roran by the collar and yanked him up. I said enough! Sovereign arrived next, pulling Jas to his feet. "Control yourselves!" Eldros and Vandrik approached. Eldros's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Stand down!" The men froze. Eldros stepped between them. "You want to fight?" "Fight me," Roran swallowed. "Sir, we—" "Fight me," Eldros repeated, "or stand together." Jas lowered his eyes. "We stand." Roran nodded. "We stand." Eldros looked at both men. "We are not the kingdom we lost. We are the circle. And the circle does not break," Vandrik added. "If you have strength to fight each other, you have strength to build." The men nodded and returned to work. Hadrin muttered, "Good speech." Eldros smirked. "I wasn't trying to give one." "Exactly," Hadrin said. "That's why it worked, the first stone." By late afternoon, Vandros's crew had cleared the ground for the headquarters. The earth was level, the measurements were marked, the foundation lines were drawn. Eldros stood at the center of the marked square. "This is where it begins," he said. Vandrik handed him a large stone, the first of many. Eldros knelt and placed it at the corner of the foundation. The men watched in silence. Hadrin placed the second stone. Sovereign placed the third. Vandros placed the fourth. Vandrik placed the fifth. 5 stones, 5 corners, 5 men. The circle. The knights cheered, the evening meal. As the sun dipped behind the ridges, the men gathered around the fire. Meat roasted on spits, bread warmed on stones. The smell filled the valley. Eldros sat with the circle, watching the men eat, laugh and talk. Hadrin tore into a piece of meat. "Feels good to build something real," Vandros nodded. "Feels good to lead," Sovereign added. "Feels good to have purpose." Vandrik looked at Eldros. "Feels good to follow a man worth following." Eldros shook his head. "We lead together," Vandrik smirked. "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." Sovereign raised his cup. To the circle. Hadrin raised his. To the valley. Vandros raised his. To the future. Vandrik raised his. To the lion. Eldros raised his last. To the men who will come after us. They drank the night watch. Later, Eldros walked the perimeter alone. The moon cast silver light across the valley. The river whispered softly. The campfires glowed like stars on the ground. Vandrik joined him quietly. "You're thinking again," Vandrik said. "I'm always thinking." "About what?" Eldros looked at the half-built foundation. "About what this place will become." Vandrik nodded. "A home. A fortress," Eldros said. "A legacy," Vandrik added. Eldros exhaled. "We're building more than walls." "Yes," Vandrik said. "We're building men." They stood in silence, watching the valley breathe. Tomorrow, the work would continue. Tomorrow, the walls would rise. Tomorrow, the circle would take another step toward becoming legend. Chapter 9. The Rising Walls. The valley woke before the sun. Hammers struck wood, axes bit into trees, voices carried across the morning air. The river whispered beside them like a steady companion. 30 men worked with purpose, not because they were ordered to, but because they believed in what they were building. Eldros stood at the center of the valley, watching the first rays of sunlight spill over the ridges. Vandrik approached, wiping sweat from his brow even though the day had barely begun. "They're working hard," Vandrik said. "They're working with hope," Eldros replied. Vandrik nodded. "Hope is a rare thing." Eldros looked at him. "Then we protect it. The first wall line." Vandros knelt in the dirt, drawing a long line with a stick. 7 knights stood behind him, waiting for instruction. "This," Vandros said, "is the southern wall. It will run from that ridge," he pointed to a rocky outcrop, "to that bend in the river." One knight frowned. "That's a long distance." Vandros smirked. "So is the future. Start digging." The men laughed and began to work. Sovereign approached, arms crossed. "Your measurements are precise." Vandros shrugged. "Precision keeps men alive," Sovereign nodded, "and keeps walls standing." The 2 men shared a rare smile, the smile of men who respected each other's discipline. Hadrin's timber crew. On the northern side of the valley, Hadrin swung his axe with the strength of a man who had spent his life in battle. 10 knights worked beside him, chopping trees, stripping branches and hauling logs. A young knight grunted as he tried to lift a heavy trunk. "This thing weighs more than my horse." Hadrin laughed. "Then lift it like you're lifting your horse." The knight groaned. "That doesn't help." Hadrin grabbed the trunk with one hand and hoisted it onto his shoulder. "Like this?" The men stared. One whispered, "Is he even human?" Another replied, "Barely." Hadrin grinned. "Less talking, more lifting." The men obeyed. Sovereign's perimeter. Sovereign walked the outer edge of the valley with 8 knights, placing stones at intervals, marking where the wall would rise. One knight asked, "Why stones?" Sovereign replied, "Because stones don't lie, they don't shift, they don't forget." Another knight pointed to a narrow gap between 2 hills. "What about there?" Sovereign studied it. "A weak point. We'll reinforce it with double timber." The knight nodded. "You see everything." Sovereign didn't smile. "That's my job," the circle's first disagreement. By midday the sun beat down hard, sweat-soaked tunics, muscles burned, the sound of work filled the valley. Eldros and Vandrik met near the river, studying the layout. Vandrik pointed to the headquarters foundation. "We should expand the central hall, make room for more men." Eldros shook his head. "Not yet. We need walls first." "The hall is the heart," Vandrik argued. "The walls are the shield," Eldros countered. Vandrik crossed his arms. "If we build too small now, we'll regret it later." Eldros stepped closer. "If we build too big now, we'll leave ourselves exposed." The tension rose. Hadrin approached, wiping sweat from his brow. "What's the problem?" Vandrik answered. "He wants walls first," Eldros replied. "He wants the hall first." Hadrin shrugged. "Why not both?" Eldros and Vandrik turned to him. Hadrin continued. "Split the men. Half on walls, half on the hall. We build both at once." Vandros walked over, overhearing. "He's right." Sovereign joined them. "Agreed." Eldros exhaled. "Fine." Vandrik nodded. "Fine." Hadrin grinned. "Good. Now stop arguing and start building. The first stone wall." The men dug deep trenches along Vandros's marked line. They hauled stones from the riverbank, stacking them carefully, layer by layer. Eldros placed the first stone of the southern wall. Vandrik placed the second. Hadrin the third. Vandros the fourth. Sovereign the fifth. 5 stones, 5 men, 1 purpose. The knights cheered. The headquarters take shape. On the raised ground, the foundation stones were set. Timber beams were lifted into place. The frame of the headquarters began to rise, tall, strong, commanding. Vandrik oversaw every detail. "Higher," he said. "Stronger, tighter, no gaps." A knight asked, "Why so strict?" Vandrik replied, "Because this building will outlive us." The knight nodded and worked harder. The first injury. Late in the afternoon, a shout echoed across the valley. A knight had slipped while lifting a heavy beam. The timber fell, pinning his leg. He cried out in pain. Eldros sprinted toward him. Vandrik was right behind. "Lift it," Eldros ordered. 5 men grabbed the beam. Hadrin grabbed it with one hand. "On 3," Eldros said. 1, 2, 3. They lifted the beam. Sovereign pulled the injured knight free. The man groaned, clutching his leg. Sovereign examined it. Not broken, but badly bruised. Eldros knelt beside him. "You'll heal," the knight nodded weakly. "I won't slow the circle." Eldros placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're part of the circle. Rest, heal, then return stronger." The knight's eyes filled with gratitude. The evening council. As the sun set, the circle gathered around the fire. The men ate, laughed, and talked, the valley alive with the sound of unity. Eldros looked at the rising walls, the growing headquarters, the men working even as night fell. "We're building something real," he said. Vandrik nodded. "Something lasting," Hadrin grinned. "Something strong," Vandros added. "Something strategic." Sovereign finished. "Something righteous." Eldros looked at them, his brothers. "We're building a home." The fire crackled. The river whispered. The valley breathed. Tomorrow, the walls would rise higher. Tomorrow, the headquarters would take shape. Tomorrow, the circle would grow stronger. Chapter 10. The Lion's Hall. The morning sun rose over the valley like a slow-burning forge, casting long golden beams across the half-built walls and the rising frame of the headquarters. Smoke drifted from cook fires, hammers rang, voices carried. The valley was alive, not with chaos, but with purpose. Eldros stood at the edge of the construction site, arms crossed, watching the men work. Vandrik approached, carrying a timber beam across his shoulders as if it weighed nothing. They're moving faster, Vandrik said. They're moving together, Eldros replied. Vandrik nodded. Unity builds faster than strength. Eldros smirked. You're starting to sound like Sovereign, Vandrik grunted. If I ever start sounding like Vandros, kill me. Eldros laughed. A rare, genuine sound. The hall rises. The headquarters, soon to be known as the Lion's Hall, was beginning to take shape. Thick timber beams formed the skeleton of the structure. Stone foundations held firm beneath them. The hall would be large, with a central chamber big enough for all 30 men to gather. Vandros stood on a raised platform, directing the placement of beams. Higher? No, not like that. Lift with your legs, not your pride. A knight shouted back, My pride is stronger than my legs. Then your pride will get you crushed, Vandros replied. The men laughed and adjusted their grip. Sovereign approached Vandros. Your measurements are holding, Vandros nodded. Of course they are, Sovereign smirked. Confidence is good, arrogance is dangerous. Vandros shrugged. I walk the line, Sovereign replied. Just don't fall off it, Hadrin's strength. On the northern side of the hall, Hadrin lifted a massive beam with 2 knights struggling beside him. Put your backs into it, Hadrin barked. One knight groaned. We are. Then put your souls into it. The men heaved, faces red, muscles trembling. Hadrin lifted his side with one arm. The knights stared. One whispered, He's not human. Another replied, He's Hadrin. Hadrin grinned. Damn right. The first banner. While the men worked, Eldros and Vandrik stepped aside to a small clearing where a long wooden pole lay on the ground. A folded cloth rested beside it, deep red, trimmed with black. Eldros knelt and unfolded the cloth. The lion stared back at him, fierce, unyielding, carved in black thread. Vandrik exhaled. It looks right. It feels right, Eldros said. They lifted the banner together and tied it to the pole. The fabric fluttered in the wind, catching the sunlight. Eldros looked at Vandrik. Ready? Vandrik nodded. Raise it! The 2 men lifted the pole and drove it into the ground beside the rising hall. The banner unfurled fully, snapping in the wind. The men stopped working. They turned. They stared. Hadrin whispered, By the gods. Vandros murmured, It's perfect. Sovereign bowed his head. A symbol worth following. Eldros raised his voice. This banner will hang over our hall, over our walls, over our future. It is the mark of the circle, the mark of men who refuse to fall. The knights cheered, their voices echoing across the valley. The first threat. The celebration was short-lived. A horn sounded from the southern ridge, sharp, urgent. Sovereign's head snapped up. That's the watch signal. Eldros grabbed his sword. Move! The circle sprinted toward the ridge, the 25 knights following close behind. They reached the lookout point where 2 sentries stood, pale and tense. Eldros stepped forward. Report. 1 sentry pointed down the slope. Riders, at least a dozen, armed. Vandrik narrowed his eyes. Traitors. Not sure, the sentry said. But they're coming fast. Hadrin cracked his knuckles. Good, I was getting bored. Vandros shook his head. We're not ready for a fight. The walls aren't finished, Sovereign replied. Then we meet them before they reach the valley. Eldros looked at his men. 30 strong, united, ready. Circle, he said. Form on me. The men moved instantly, forming a tight formation behind him. Vandrik stepped beside Eldros. If they want a fight, they'll get one. Eldros nodded. But we decide how it ends. The riders arrive. The riders crested the hill. 12 men on horseback, armored, armed, moving with purpose. They slowed when they saw the circle waiting for them. The leader, a tall man with a scar across his jaw, raised a hand. We come in peace, he shouted. Hadrin muttered. They always say that. Eldros stepped forward. State your purpose. The leader dismounted and approached slowly, hands open. We're survivors, he said. Loyalists. We heard rumors of a group building something new, something strong, Vandrik whispered. Rumors travel too fast. Eldros kept his sword ready. Who told you? The man shook his head. Word spreads. Men talk. Hope moves faster than fear. Eldros studied him. And what do you want? The man knelt. To join you. The other riders dismounted and knelt behind him. We have nowhere else to go, the leader said. But we have strength, skill, loyalty, and we will follow you. The valley fell silent. Vandros whispered, This is how legends grow. Sovereign nodded. This is how kingdoms begin. Eldros stepped forward. Rise, he said. The men rose. Welcome to the circle. Chapter 11. The circle reconvenes. Night settled over the valley like a heavy cloak. The fires burned low. The men slept in scattered tents, exhausted from the day's work. The new arrivals, the 12 riders who pledged themselves to the circle, rested near the river, their horses tied and watered. But the circle did not sleep. Eldros stood inside the half-built headquarters, the timber frame rising above him like the ribs of a great beast. Moonlight filtered through the beams, casting long shadows across the dirt floor. One by one the others entered. Vandric, Hadrin, Vandros, Sovereign. They formed a circle around Eldros, not by ritual but by instinct. Vandric spoke first. "We need to talk." Eldros nodded. "We do." Hadrin crossed his arms. 30 men became 42 in a single day, Vandros added, "and more will come." Sovereign's voice was steady. "Hope spreads, word spreads, men will follow strength." Eldros looked at each of them. "Then we must decide what we are, the question of leadership." Vandric leaned against a timber beam. "We're no longer 5 men in a cave, we're leaders of a growing force." Hadrin nodded. "A force needs structure," Vandros added, "and structure needs leadership." Sovereign looked at Eldros. "And leadership needs a head." Eldros frowned. "We lead together." Vandric stepped forward. "We do, but the men look to you." Eldros shook his head. "They look to all of us." "No," Vandric said. "They look to you first." Hadrin grinned. "He's right. You're the one they watch, the one they listen to." Vandros smirked. "The one they'd follow into fire," Sovereign finished. "The one they'd die for." Eldros looked away, jaw tight. "I didn't ask for that." Vandric stepped closer. "Leadership isn't asked for, it's earned." Eldros met his eyes. "And what about you?" Vandric shrugged. "I lead beside you, but you lead above us." The hall fell silent. Eldros finally spoke. "If I lead, it is because we stand as one, not because I stand alone." Sovereign nodded. "Then let that be our structure." Hadrin grinned. "Eldros at the front, Vandric at his right, the rest of us where we're needed," Vandros added, a circle with a point. Eldros exhaled. "Very well, the first council." Vandric stepped into the center of the hall. "Then let's begin." Hadrin cracked his knuckles. "First order of business, the new men." Vandros nodded. "We need to test them," Sovereign added, "and train them." Eldros asked. "What do we know about them?" Vandric replied. "They're loyalists. They fought in the southern fields. They lost everything." Hadrin said, "Men like that are dangerous." Sovereign countered, "Men like that are useful." Vandros smirked. "Men like that are desperate." Eldros finished, "Men like that are ours now." The circle nodded. Vandric continued, "We need captains, men to lead groups of 10. Hadrin raised an eyebrow. "You volunteering?" Vandric shook his head. "No, I'm volunteering you." Hadrin laughed. "Fair enough," Vandros said. "I'll take the planners, the builders," Sovereign added. "I'll take the perimeter and the watch." Eldros nodded. "And I'll take the riders." The circle looked at him. Vandric smirked. "Of course you will, the threat on the horizon." A sudden knock echoed through the hall. A knight entered, Ronan, the scar-cheeked survivor from earlier. "Forgive the interruption," Ronan said, "but we found something." Eldros stepped forward. "What is it?" Ronan swallowed. "Tracks, fresh ones, near the southern ridge." Vandric's eyes narrowed. "How many?" "Hard to say," Ronan replied. "But more than a scouting party." Hadrin muttered. "Traitors." Sovereign asked, "How close?" "Close enough to be a problem," Ronan said. Eldros looked at the circle. "We move at dawn." Vandric nodded. "We scout first." Hadrin cracked his knuckles. "Then we crush them." Vandros smirked. "Let's not crush anything until we know what we're crushing," Sovereign added. "We prepare the men." Eldros turned to Ronan. "Good work. Get some rest." Ronan bowed and left. The circle's oath renewed. The 5 men stood alone again in the half-built hall. Eldros placed his hand on one of the timber beams. "This hall will be our heart." Vandric placed his hand beside his. "These walls will be our shield." Hadrin placed his hand next. "This valley will be our home." Vandros added his. "This banner will be our mark." Sovereign placed his last. "And this circle will be our legacy." Eldros looked at them, his brothers. "Tomorrow," he said, "we defend what we've begun." The wind moved through the beams like a whisper of destiny. The circle stood united. Chapter 12. The Shadows. A tea dawn. Dawn crept over the valley in a thin line of pale gold, brushing the tops of the unfinished walls and the rising frame of the Lion's Hall. The fires from the night watch still smouldered. The river whispered. The air was cold and sharp. Eldros stood at the southern ridge, cloak pulled tight, eyes fixed on the horizon. He hadn't slept. Not after Ronan's report. Not with the threat of unknown riders moving near their home. Vandrick approached quietly, boots crunching on frost-coated grass. "You didn't rest," Vandrick said. Eldros didn't look away from the horizon. "Neither did you." Vandrick smirked. "Someone has to make sure you don't get yourself killed." Eldros finally turned. "I'm not planning on dying today." "Good," Vandrick said. "Because we're not burying you in half-finished dirt." Eldros almost smiled. Almost. The circle gathers. One by one the others arrived. Hadrin carrying his massive axe over his shoulder. Vandros already studying the terrain. Sovereign, calm and steady as stone. Behind them the 42 knights assembled in tight formation, armored, armed, ready. Eldros stepped forward. "Men of the circle," he said, voice carrying across the ridge. "Today we face our first test." The men straightened. Tracks were found near the southern ridge. Fresh, many. "We don't know who they are. We don't know what they want," Vandrick added. "But we know this. No one approaches our valley without being seen." Hadrin slammed the butt of his axe into the ground. "And no one threatens it without bleeding." Vandros pointed to the horizon. "We scout first. We strike only if necessary." Sovereign finished. "We move with discipline." Eldros nodded. "Circle. Form on me." The men moved instantly. The descent. They rode out at dawn, hooves thundering across the frost-covered grass. Eldros led the front line, Vandrick at his right, Hadrin at his left. Vandros and Sovereign rode behind, directing the formation. The valley shrank behind them as they climbed the southern ridge. When they reached the top, Eldros raised a fist. "Hold!" The horses stopped. Silence, wind, and then tracks, dozens of them, fresh. Vandros dismounted and knelt beside the prince. Heavy riders, armored, moving fast. Sovereign scanned the tree line. "They passed through here less than an hour ago." Hadrin gripped his axe. "Then let's catch them." Eldros shook his head. "Not yet." He pointed to the horizon. A thin column of smoke rose in the distance. Vandrick narrowed his eyes. "A camp, or a trap," Sovereign said. Eldros mounted again. "We find out the enemy camp." They approached slowly, silently, weaving through the trees until they reached a clearing overlooking the camp. A dozen tents, a ring of horses, men sharpening blades, men wearing armor marked with a symbol Eldros recognized instantly. A broken crown. Traitors. Vandrick's jaw tightened. "I knew it," Hadrin growled. "Let me at them." Vandros shook his head. "Not yet." Sovereign pointed. "Look, at the center of the camp, tied to a post, beaten and bloodied." "A knight. One of theirs," Ronan whispered. "That's Dalen. He went missing 2 days ago." Eldros's eyes hardened. "They captured him." Vandrick's voice was low. "They tortured him." Hadrin's grip tightened on his axe. "Then they die." Eldros raised a hand. "Not yet." He studied the camp. 12 men, armored, alert. Dangerous, but not prepared for a circle. Eldros turned to his men. "We take them quietly," he said. "Fast, clean, no mercy." Vandrick nodded. "Just how I like it." The silent strike. The circle moved like shadows. Eldros and Vandrick took the left flank. Hadrin and Sovereign took the right. Vandros led a small group straight down the center. The traitors didn't hear them until it was too late. Eldros struck first, blade slicing through a guard's throat. Vandrick followed, driving his sword into another man's ribs. Hadrin swung his axe, splitting a shield, and the man behind it. Sovereign moved with precision, cutting tendons, disabling enemies before finishing them. Vandros directed the center group, overwhelming the camp with speed and coordination. The traitors scrambled, shouting, grabbing weapons, but the circle was already inside their defenses. One traitor charged Eldros, screaming. Eldros sidestepped and drove his blade into the man's chest. Another swung at Vandrick. Vandrick caught the blade with his gauntlet, twisted, and snapped the man's wrist before finishing him. Hadrin roared as he cut down 2 men at once. Sovereign fought like a surgeon, every strike precise, every movement efficient. Vandros moved like a tactician, directing, adjusting, controlling the flow of battle. In minutes it was over. The camp was silent. The traitors were dead. The circle stood victorious. The rescue. Eldros rushed to the tied knight. "Dalen!" Dalen lifted his head weakly. Sir, I knew you'd come. Eldros cut the ropes and caught him as he fell. Sovereign examined him. He'll live. Dalen gripped Eldros's arm. They were scouting, planning to attack the valley. More are coming. Eldros's eyes hardened. How many? Dalen swallowed. Dozens, maybe more. Vandrick stepped forward. Then we prepare. Hadrin cracked his knuckles. Let them come. Vandros nodded. We'll be ready, Sovereign added. We must return. Now. Eldros lifted Dalen onto his horse. Circle, he said. Form up. The men mounted. We ride home. The ride back. They rode hard, the forest whipping past them, the valley drawing closer with every thunderous hoofbeat. Eldros looked at the rising walls, the half-built hall, the men working below. This was their home, their future, their legacy, and now, their battlefield. Vandrick rode beside him. This is only the beginning, Eldros nodded. Then we meet it head-on. Chapter 13. The Eve of Steel. The valley was no longer quiet. Word of the traitor scouts spread through the camp like wildfire. Men sharpened blades, checked armor, reinforced tents, strengthened the half-built walls. The air hummed with tension. Not fear, but readiness. Eldros stood at the center of the valley, watching the men move with purpose. The Lion's Hall rose behind him, its frame tall and commanding. The banner snapped in the wind, the black-threaded lion glaring down at the world. Vandrick approached, cloak whipping behind him. They're preparing well, Vandrick said. They're preparing because they know what's coming, Eldros replied. Vandrick nodded. Dalen said dozens, maybe more. Eldros's jaw tightened. Then we meet them with more. The gathering of 42. The circle assembled the men near the river. 42 knights stood in formation, armored, armed, disciplined. Eldros stepped forward. Men of the circle, he said, voice carrying across the valley. We have built walls, we have raised a hall, we have carved a home from the wilderness. The men straightened. But now, someone seeks to take it from us. A low growl rippled through the ranks. Vandrick stepped beside him. Traitors move toward our valley. They know we're here. They know we're building something strong. Hadrin slammed the butt of his axe into the ground. Then let them come, Vandros added. We will not be caught unprepared. Sovereign finished. We will not be caught divided. Eldros nodded. Tonight we prepare. Tomorrow we fight. The circle's strategy. Inside the half-built Lion's Hall, the circle gathered around a rough wooden table. Vandros had drawn a map of the valley in the dirt. He pointed to the southern ridge. They'll come from here. It's the only path wide enough for a large force. Sovereign added. We place archers on the ridge. 10 men, Hadrin grinned. And the rest of us meet them head-on. Vandrick shook his head. Not head-on. We use the terrain. He pointed to a narrow choke point between two boulders. Here. Only 3 men can pass at a time. Eldros nodded. We hold them there. Vandros smirked. A bottleneck, Sovereign added. A slaughter. Hadrin cracked his knuckles. I like this plan. Eldros looked at each of them. We fight smart. We fight united. We fight as the circle. The night before battle. The valley glowed with firelight as the men prepared for the coming fight. Armor was polished, blades sharpened, horses fed and watered. The air smelled of smoke, steel, and anticipation. Eldros walked among the men, offering words, nods, and presents. He didn't need to give speeches. His presence alone steadied them. Ronan approached him. Sir, thank you for saving Dalen. Eldros nodded. He's one of us, Ronan swallowed. We'll fight hard tomorrow. You'll fight smart, Eldros corrected. Hard comes after. Ronan smiled and returned to his group. Vandrick joined Eldros. They're ready, they're willing, Eldros said. Readiness comes with the first clash. Vandrick smirked. Then let's give them a good one. The circle's private moment. Later, the 5 gathered at the riverbank. The moon reflected off the water like a blade of silver. Hadrin sat on a rock, sharpening his axe. Vandros studied the map again. Sovereign checked the straps on his armor. Vandrick leaned against a tree, arms crossed. Eldros stood at the water's edge, silent. Vandrick finally spoke. You're thinking again. Eldros didn't turn. I'm thinking about what comes after. Hadrin grinned. After we crush them. After we win, Eldros said. More will come. Word will spread. This valley will not stay hidden. Sovereign nodded. Then we build faster, Vandross added, and stronger. Vandrick stepped beside Eldros. And we lead better. Eldros looked at them, his brothers. We stand together tomorrow, he said. Hadrin placed his axe across his knees. We always do, Vandross smirked. We're the circle, Sovereign nodded. And the circle does not break, Vandrick finished. Not now, not ever. Eldros placed his hand over his heart. No man stands alone, the others repeated it. No man stands alone. The watchfire. As the valley slept, Eldros climbed the southern ridge alone. He lit a single watchfire, a beacon, a warning, a promise. The flames flickered in the wind. He looked out across the dark horizon. Somewhere out there, dozens of traitors marched toward them. Toward the valley. Toward the Lion's Hall. Toward the circle. Eldros tightened his grip on his sword. Come, he whispered into the night. We're ready. The fire crackled. The wind shifted. And in the distance, faint but unmistakable, he heard it. The sound of marching. Chapter 14. The First Battle of the Lion. The sound of marching grew louder as dawn broke over the southern ridge, not the steady rhythm of disciplined soldiers, but the uneven, hungry stomp of men who had tasted blood and wanted more. Traitors. Eldros stood at the ridge's edge, cloak snapping in the cold wind, eyes fixed on the horizon. Vandrick stood beside him, jaw tight, hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Below them, the valley stirred. 42 knights armed themselves. Horses were saddled, arrows were counted. The Lion's Hall loomed behind them, half-built but proud. Hadrin approached, axe slung over his shoulder. They're close, Vandross joined him, carrying a rolled map, closer than we expected. Sovereign stepped forward, calm as ever. Then we meet them, Eldros nodded. Circle, to me, the enemy revealed. The traitors crested the far hill, dozens of them, armored, armed, faces twisted with hatred. Their leader rode at the front, a tall man with a jagged scar across his forehead and a broken crown emblem painted on his shield. Hadrin growled, I know that man. Vandrick narrowed his eyes. Who is he? Captain Ralla, Hadrin said. One of the king's commanders. Turned traitor the moment the gates fell. Vandross spat. A coward, Sovereign added. A threat. Eldros stepped forward. A dead man. The parley. Ralla rode ahead of his men, stopping halfway down the slope. He raised a hand. Circle, he shouted. I offer terms, Hadrin scoffed. Terms? From him? Vandrick smirked. Let's hear the fool. Eldros rode forward alone, stopping several paces from Raylor. Raylor sneered. You've built something here, something impressive. But it belongs to the new order now. Eldros said nothing. Ralla continued. Surrender your valley. Lay down your arms, swear loyalty to the new crown, and I may let you live. Eldros finally spoke. No. Raylor blinked. No? No, Eldros repeated. Not today. Not ever. Raylor's face twisted with rage. Then you will die with the rest of your fools. Eldros leaned forward slightly. Come and try, Raylor snarled and rode back to his men. Vandrick rode up beside Eldros. Well, that went well, Eldros smirked. I thought so. The battle begins. Eldros raised his sword. Circle, form. The men moved instantly. Archers climbed the ridge. Shield-bearers formed a tight line. Swordsmen flanked them. Hadrin stood at the center, axe gleaming. Vandross directed the archers. Sovereign commanded the perimeter. Vandrick rode to Eldros's right. The traitors charged. The ground shook. The air filled with shouts. Steel flashed. Vandross shouted, Archers, loose! Arrows rained down, striking the front line of traitors. Men fell. Horses screamed. The charge faltered. But Ralla roared, Forward! The traitors surged again. Eldros lowered his sword. Circle! Advance! The two forces collided like thunder. The clash. Eldros met the first traitor with a brutal downward strike, splitting shield and bone. Vandrick parried a blow and countered with a thrust to the throat. Hadrin swung his axe in a wide arc, cutting down 2 men at once. Sovereign fought with precision, disabling enemies before finishing them. Vandross directed the archers, adjusting angles, calling targets. The battle raged. Steel rang, blood sprayed, men screamed. A traitor lunged at Eldros. Eldros sidestepped and drove his blade into the man's ribs. Another charged Vandrick. Vandrick caught the man's wrist, twisted and snapped it before finishing him. Hadrin roared as he fought, unstoppable, unbreakable. Sovereign moved like a shadow, calm even in chaos. Vandross shouted, "Left flank! Reinforce!" The circle moved as one. R'hllor enters the fight. R'hllor rode into the fray, swinging a massive warhammer. He struck a knight, sending him flying. Eldros saw him. "R'hllor!" he shouted. R'hllor turned, eyes burning with hatred. "You!" Eldros charged. Their blades met with a crash that echoed across the valley. R'hllor swung his hammer. Eldros dodged. R'hllor swung again. Eldros blocked, the impact rattling his bones. "You should have bowed!" R'hllor roared. Eldros snarled. "I bow to no traitor." R'hllor swung overhead. Eldros rolled aside and slashed R'hllor's leg. R'hllor stumbled. Eldros pressed forward. Vandrick shouted, "Eldros, behind you!" A traitor charged. Eldros spun and cut him down. R'hllor rose again, fury in his eyes. "This valley is mine!" he screamed. Eldros stepped forward. "No," he said. "It's ours." He drove his sword through R'hllor's chest. R'hllor gasped, eyes wide, and fell. The traitors saw their leader fall. Their formation broke. They fled. Victory. The valley fell silent except for the heavy breathing of exhausted men. Hadrin leaned on his axe. That was satisfying. Vandross wiped blood from his blade. "They'll think twice before coming again." Sovereign nodded. "But they will come again." Vandrick stepped beside Eldros. "You killed their captain." Eldros looked at the fallen traitors. "Then we bury our dead. And we build higher walls." The knights cheered. The circle had won their first battle. But Eldros knew this was only the beginning. Chapter 15. After the Blood. The valley was quiet. Too quiet. The battle had ended hours ago, but the echoes of steel still clung to the air like ghosts. Smoke drifted from the pyres where the traitors' bodies burned. The river carried away the last traces of blood. The half-built Lion's Hall stood tall above the valley, its frame dark against the fading light. Eldros walked among the wounded, cloak torn, armor dented, hands stained with the day's violence. He had fought before, he had killed before, but this was different. This was his valley, his men, his responsibility. Vandrick approached, wiping blood from his blade. "We lost 3. Eldros stopped walking. "Names: Torren, Jast, Malric." Eldros closed his eyes. "Good men, the best," Vandrick said quietly. Eldros exhaled slowly. "We bury them with honor, the fallen." The circle gathered at the riverbank where the 3 bodies lay wrapped in cloth. Hadrin knelt beside them, head bowed. Vandross stood with arms crossed, jaw tight. Sovereign placed a hand on each shroud, whispering a prayer. Eldros stepped forward. "Torren Jast Malric," he said, voice steady but heavy. "You fought with courage, you stood with honor, you died as brothers." The men around him lowered their heads. Eldros continued, "We do not forget our own. We do not abandon our dead. We carry their names, we carry their strength, we carry their legacy." Hadrin rose. "They died building something worth dying for," Vandross added. "And we will finish what they started." Sovereign nodded. "Their blood strengthens our foundation." Vandrick placed a hand on Eldros's shoulder. "Say the words." Eldros looked at the river. "No man stands alone." The circle repeated it. "No man stands alone." The bodies were lowered into the river, the current carrying them gently away. The valley was silent. The wounded knight. As the men dispersed, Eldros noticed a young knight sitting alone near the half-built wall, clutching his arm. Blood seeped through the bandage. Eldros approached. "Let me see." The knight hesitated. "Sir, I'm fine." Eldros knelt. "You're bleeding through your bandage. You're not fine." The knight swallowed. "I didn't want to slow the others." Eldros tightened the bandage with practiced hands. "Strength isn't just in fighting, it's in healing. Rest." The knight nodded, eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you, sir." Eldros stood and walked away, feeling the weight of every life in the valley pressing on his shoulders. The circle reconvenes. Inside the Lion's Hall, the 5 gathered again, weary, bruised, but unbroken. Hadrin leaned against a beam. "We won," Vandross corrected him. "We survived," Sovereign added. "And we learned." Vandrick looked at Eldros. "What now?" Eldros stared at the map carved into the dirt floor. "We build higher walls," he said. "We train harder. We prepare for more." Vandrick nodded. Because more will come. They will, Eldros said. Ralla was only the beginning. Hadrin cracked his knuckles. Good, I'm not done swinging, Vandros smirked. You never are, Sovereign stepped forward. We need structure, ranks, roles, order. Eldros nodded. Agreed. The first command structure. Eldros pointed to each man in turn. Hadrin, you lead the vanguard, the front line, the hammer. Hadrin grinned. Gladly. Vandros, you oversee strategy, planning and construction. Vandros nodded. The mind of the circle. Sovereign, you command the watch, the scouts and the perimeter. Sovereign bowed his head. The eyes of the circle. Eldros turned to Vandrik. And you? Vandrik raised an eyebrow. Yes. You are my right hand. Vandrik smirked. I thought I already was. You are, Eldros said. Now it's official. The circle stood taller, stronger, united, the night of resolve. Later, Eldros walked alone to the ridge where he had stood the night before. The watchfire still burned. The wind carried the scent of smoke and pine. Vandrik joined him quietly. You're thinking again, Vandrik said. I'm thinking about what comes next. Vandrik nodded. More battles, more men, more responsibility. Eldros looked at the valley below, the walls rising, the hall taking shape, the men moving with purpose. This place will be a fortress, he said. It already is, Vandrik replied. Eldros shook his head. Not yet, but it will be, Vandrik smirked. And we'll build it. Eldros placed a hand on his sword. We will. The wind shifted. The fire crackled, and Eldros whispered the words that had become the circle's heartbeat. No man stands alone. Vandrik repeated them softly. No man stands alone. The valley slept. But the circle did not. Chapter 16. The Rising of the Lion's Hall. The morning after the battle dawned cold and bright. The valley smelled of wet earth, smoke and steel. The river ran clear again, washing away the last traces of blood. The men moved slowly, stiff from the fight, but their eyes burned with renewed purpose. Eldros stood at the center of the valley, staring at the half-built Lion's Hall. The frame towered above the camp, tall, proud, defiant, a symbol of what they were becoming. Vandrik approached, cloak fluttering behind him. The men are ready. Eldros nodded. Then we build. The day of rebuilding. The circle divided the men into crews again. Hadrin's crew, timber and strength. Hadrin led 15 men into the forest, axes swinging, voices echoing through the trees. He moved like a force of nature, felling trees with brutal efficiency. A young knight asked, how many beams do we need? Hadrin grinned. All of them. Sovereign's crew, perimeter and defense. Sovereign walked the valley's edge, marking new lines for the expanded wall. He placed stones with precision, measuring distances with a soldier's eye. One knight asked, why expand now? Sovereign replied, because the enemy knows we're here, and we're not hiding. Vandros's crew, architecture and strategy. Vandros stood on a raised platform, directing the placement of beams and stones. Higher, he shouted. Tighter. No gaps. This hall will outlive us. The men obeyed, sweat pouring, muscles burning. Eldros and Vandrik, leadership and unity. The two walked the valley, checking progress, offering guidance, steadying morale. Vandrik murmured, they're working harder than before. They're working with purpose, Eldros said. Because of you. Because of us, Eldros corrected. Vandrik didn't argue. The Lion's Hall takes shape. By midday, the hall's walls rose higher. The roof beams were lifted into place. The central chamber began to form, wide, tall, commanding. The men paused to admire it. Hadrin whistled. Now that's a hall, Vandros smirked. And it's only half done. Sovereign nodded. It will be a fortress. Vandrik looked at Eldros. It will be a symbol. Eldros stepped forward, placing his hand on one of the beams. It will be our heart, the arrival of the refugees. As the men worked, a horn sounded from the northern ridge. Sovereign's voice cut through the valley. Riders approaching. The circle moved instantly. Eldros and Vandrik mounted their horses and rode to the ridge. Hadrin, Vandros, and Sovereign followed with a dozen knights. When they reached the top, they saw them. Not traitors, not soldiers, families, men, women, children, weary, hungry, desperate, carrying what little they had left. A man stepped forward, hands raised. "Please, we seek shelter." Eldros's jaw tightened. "Where are you from?" "North of Aramor," the man said. "Our village was burned. We heard rumors of a valley where good men still live." Vandrick whispered. "Word spreads too fast," Sovereign murmured. "But these are innocents." Hadrin crossed his arms. "We can't feed everyone," Vandros added, "but we can't turn them away." Eldros looked at the refugees, the fear in their eyes, the hope in their voices. He made his decision. "You may enter," Eldros said. "You are safe here." The refugees wept with relief. The circle watched them descend into the valley. Vandrick spoke quietly. "This changes everything." Eldros nodded. "Yes, it does." The circle's debate. Back inside the Lion's Hall, the five gathered again. Hadrin slammed his fist on a beam. "We can't feed all of them," Vandros countered. "We can if we ration," Sovereign added, "and if we hunt." Vandrick looked at Eldros. "This valley was meant for warriors, not families." Eldros shook his head. "This valley was meant for a future, and a future needs more than warriors." Silence. Then Hadrin sighed. "Fine, but we need more food," Vandros nodded. "And more shelter," Sovereign added. "And more walls," Vandrick smirked. "And more men." Eldros looked at them, his brothers. "Then we build faster, the first meal in the hall." That evening, the circle invited the refugees into the half-built hall. The men shared their food. The children sat wide-eyed beneath the towering beams. The women whispered prayers of thanks. Eldros stood at the center of the hall watching them. Vandrick approached. "You did the right thing." Eldros nodded. "I know, but it will cost us." "I know that too." Vandrick smirked. "Good. Wouldn't want you getting soft." Eldros chuckled. "I'm not the one who cried when the banner was raised." Vandrick glared. "I did not cry, you did. Shut up." They both laughed. The night of new purpose. Later, Eldros walked alone to the ridge. The valley below glowed with firelight. The Lion's Hall stood tall, filled with life. The walls rose higher. The people slept safely. Vandrick joined him. "You're thinking again," Vandrick said. "I'm thinking about what we're becoming." Vandrick nodded. "A village, a refuge, a fortress, a future." Eldros looked at him. "A kingdom?" Vandrick smirked. "One day." Eldros placed his hand over his heart. "No man stands alone." Vandrick repeated it softly. "No man stands alone," the valley breathed. The Lion's Hall stood, and the circle's destiny grew. Chapter 17. The First Council of the Lion. The valley woke to a new sound. Not hammers, not axes, not the shouts of men training, voices, dozens of them. Children laughing, women speaking softly, refugees moving through the camp with cautious hope. The circle's valley, once a place of warriors, now breathed with life. Eldros stood at the entrance of the Lion's Hall watching the morning unfold. The hall was still unfinished, but its presence dominated the valley. The rising walls cast long shadows across the ground. The lion banner snapped in the wind. Vandrick approached, arms crossed. "We're becoming a village," Eldros nodded. "Yes, are you ready for that?" Eldros didn't answer. Because he wasn't sure. The first council convenes. Inside the hall, the circle gathered around a long wooden table Vandros had ordered built the night before. It was rough, uneven, still smelling of fresh-cut timber, but it was a table meant for leaders. Hadrin sat heavily, axe resting beside him. Vandros spread out maps and sketches. Sovereign stood with arms behind his back, posture rigid. Vandrick leaned against a beam, watching everything. Eldros took his place at the head of the table. Vandros spoke first. "We have a problem," Hadrin snorted. "Just one?" Vandros pointed to the valley map. "We have 42 knights. And now nearly 60 refugees." Sovereign added. "Food will run short," Hadrin grumbled. "I told you that yesterday," Vandrick smirked. "You tell us everything every day," Hadrin glared. "Because I'm right every day." Eldros raised a hand. "Enough. What do we need?" Vandros replied. "More farmland, more hunters, more builders," Sovereign added. "More guards." Hadrin leaned forward. "More walls," Vandrick looked at Eldros. "And more leadership." Eldros exhaled. "Then let's begin. The first assignments." Eldros pointed to Hadrin. You take 20 men, clear land for farming, fell trees, prepare soil. Hadrin grinned. Finally, something heavy. Eldros turned to Sovereign. You take 10 men, expand the perimeter, double the watch. No one enters this valley unseen. Sovereign nodded. Consider it done. Eldros looked at Vandross. You oversee construction. The hall must be finished. And we need more shelters, Vandross smirked. I'll make this valley a fortress. Finally, Eldros turned to Vandrik. You and I will train the new recruits. Vandrik raised an eyebrow. Recruits? Eldros nodded. The refugees brought men, farmers, hunters, woodsmen. They're not soldiers, but they can become something. Vandrik grinned. Good. I was getting bored. The first recruits. Eldros and Vandrik walked to the open field near the river, where a group of men waited, nervous, uncertain, hopeful. Some were young, some were old, some carried hunting bows, some carried nothing at all. Eldros stepped forward. You came here seeking safety, he said. You have it. The men relaxed slightly. But safety is not free. They tensed again. Vandrik stepped beside him. This valley stands because men fought for it. If you want to stay, you must stand with us. A young man raised his hand. Sir, we're not soldiers, Eldros nodded. Neither were we, not at first. Vandrik smirked. Speak for yourself. Eldros ignored him. You will learn, Eldros said. You will train, you will defend this valley. And in return, this valley will defend you. The men exchanged looks. Then one stepped forward, a broad-shouldered farmer with calloused hands. I'll train, he said. Another stepped forward, then another, then all of them. Vandrik whispered, You're getting good at this. Eldros replied, I'm not trying to be. That's why it works. The Lion's Hall grows. While Eldros and Vandrik trained the recruits, the rest of the valley roared with activity. Hadrin's crew. Trees fell, logs were hauled, soil was cleared. The first farmland began to take shape. Hadrin shouted, Lift with your legs, not your fear! Sovereign's crew. New watchtowers were marked, perimeter stones were placed. Scouts moved through the forest with discipline. Sovereign murmured, No blind spots, not anymore. Vandross's crew. The hall's walls rose higher, roof beams were secured, stone foundations were reinforced. Vandross barked, If this hall collapses, I'll bury you in it. The men laughed and worked harder. The first feast. That evening the valley gathered for a meal, the first true feast since the circle arrived. Refugees and knights sat together. Children played near the river, women cooked over large fires, the Lion's Hall glowed with torchlight. Eldros stood at the entrance watching the valley breathe. Vandrik approached. You built this? Eldros shook his head. We built this, Vandrik smirked. You're stubborn, and you talk too much. True, they both laughed. The whisper in the woods. As the feast continued, Sovereign approached Eldros quietly. We have a problem, Sovereign said. Eldros's expression hardened. What is it? Sovereign pointed toward the dark tree line. One of my scouts found something. What? Sovereign's voice dropped. A symbol carved into a tree. Eldros frowned. What symbol? Sovereign answered. A crown, broken in half. Vandrik stepped forward. Traitors? Sovereign nodded. They were here. Recently. Eldros looked at the valley, the people, the children, the hall, the walls. His jaw tightened. They're watching us. Vandrik's hand went to his sword. Then let them watch. Eldros shook his head. No, we find them. The wind shifted. The torches flickered. And the valley, once peaceful, felt suddenly smaller. Chapter 18. The Hunt in the Trees. Night fell heavy over the valley. The fires burned low. The refugees slept in clusters near the river. The knights kept watch from the half-built towers. The Lion's Hall loomed above them all, its rising frame lit by torchlight. But Eldros did not sleep. He stood at the edge of the tree line, staring into the dark woods where Sovereign's scout had found the carved symbol, a broken crown. A warning. A message. A promise. Vandrik approached quietly, boots crunching on pine needles. You're thinking again. Eldros didn't look away. They were here, watching us. Vandrik nodded. Then we hunt them. Eldros turned. Gather the circle. The circle assembles. Inside the Lion's Hall, the five gathered around the long wooden table. Hadrin slammed his fist down. Traitors carving symbols in our trees? I'll carve something into them. Vandross studied the map. The mark was fresh. They were close. Sovereign nodded. Too close. Vandric leaned forward. We take a small group, fast, silent. We track them. Eldros looked at each of them. We move now. Hadrin grinned. Finally, the hunt begins. The circle moved into the forest with 10 of their best knights, silent, disciplined, deadly. The moonlight filtered through the branches, casting silver patterns across the ground. The air smelled of pine and damp earth. Every sound felt louder in the quiet. Sovereign led the way, eyes sharp, movements precise. He knelt beside a tree. Here. The broken crown symbol was carved deep into the bark, jagged, angry. Hadrin growled. Cowards! Sovereign pointed to the ground. Tracks, 3 men, moving north. Vandross frowned. Scouts? Spies, Sovereign said. Sent to watch us. Eldros's voice hardened. Then we end them. The forest tightens. They moved deeper into the woods, following the tracks. The trees grew thicker, the air colder, the silence heavier. A knight whispered, Feels wrong here. Vandric replied, Good. Stay alert. Sovereign raised a hand. Stop. The circle froze. Sovereign pointed to a patch of disturbed leaves. Someone knelt here. Recently. Hadrin sniffed the air. Smoke. Vandross nodded. A camp. Eldros whispered, Move. The enemy camp. They approached slowly, crouched low behind fallen logs and thick brush. A small campfire flickered in a clearing. 3 men sat around it, armored, armed, wearing the broken crown emblem. Traitors. One sharpened a blade, one cleaned blood from his gauntlet, one stared into the fire, muttering. Eldros signaled. Hadrin whispered, Alive or dead? Eldros answered, Alive if possible. Vandric smirked. Dead if necessary. The silent takedown. The circle moved like shadows. Sovereign slipped behind the first man, clamping a hand over his mouth and dragging him into the dark. Hadrin grabbed the second by the throat, lifting him off the ground before slamming him into a tree. Vandric tackled the third, pinning him with a knee to the chest. Eldros stepped forward, sword drawn. Speak, Eldros said. The pinned traitor spat blood. Go to hell, Vandric pressed harder. He asked you a question, the man gasped. We were sent to watch. By who? Eldros demanded. The man hesitated. Hadrin growled. Answer. The traitor swallowed. General Varkos, Vandross stiffened. Varkos, he survived. Sovereign nodded grimly. He was one of the king's highest commanders. When the kingdom fell, he sided with the traitors. Eldros's voice dropped. Where is he? The traitor laughed weakly. Closer than you think. Vandric slammed him against the ground. Where? The man coughed blood. He's coming. With an army. Eldros's eyes hardened. How many? The traitor whispered. Hundreds. The forest fell silent. The execution. Eldros stepped back. We take them to the valley. The traitor laughed again. Too late. He knows where you are. He knows what you're building. He's coming to burn it all. Hadrin raised his axe. Let me kill him. Eldros shook his head. Not yet. The traitor smirked. You think you can stop him? You think your little valley can stand against Varkos? Eldros stepped forward, voice cold as steel. We don't stand alone. The traitor spat at his feet. Eldros nodded once. Vandric understood. Steel flashed. The traitor fell. The other 2 were executed quickly, clean, silent, without cruelty. The circle stood over the bodies. Sovereign spoke first. If Varkos is coming, we have little time. Vandross added, We need more walls, more men, more everything. Hadrin cracked his knuckles. Good, I'm not done fighting. Vandric looked at Eldros. What now? Eldros stared into the dark forest. We return to the valley, he turned, and we prepare for war. The return. They moved quickly through the trees, the weight of the revelation pressing on their shoulders. When they reached the valley ridge, the fires below glowed warmly. The Lion's Hall stood tall, the people slept safely. For now, Vandric whispered, they have no idea what's coming. Eldros nodded. Then we tell them. Chapter 19. The Day the Lion Stood. The sun rose over the valley like a slow-burning forge, casting gold across the walls that now circled the land. Not half-built, not makeshift, finished. The timber was sealed, the stone was set, the watchtowers stood tall, banners snapping in the morning wind. And at the center of it all, towering, proud, unyielding, stood the Lion's Hall, the heart of the circle. Eldros stood before it, boots planted in the dirt he had bled on, fought on, built on. The hall's great doors were carved with the lion's head, fierce, unbroken, eternal. Vandric approached, wiping sawdust from his hands. "It's done." Eldros nodded. "It is." Hadrin strode up next, carrying a beam on one shoulder even though the work was finished. "Feels strange not lifting something." Vandros smirked. "Lift your spirits," Sovereign added. "Lift your discipline." Hadrin glared. "Lift your face off the ground." Vandros laughed. "There he is." Eldros stepped forward, placing his hand on the hall's door. "This," he said quietly, "is the beginning, the first gathering in the hall." The doors opened. Light spilled into the great chamber, wide, tall, built with purpose. The ceiling beams arched like the ribs of a great beast. The stone floor was smooth and strong. Torches lined the walls, their flames dancing. The knights entered first, 42 men who had fought, bled, and built together. Then the refugees, families, children, elders, stepping inside with awe in their eyes. Eldros walked to the center of the hall. The circle followed, Vandric at his right, Hadrin at his left, Vandros and Sovereign behind him. The five stood together, the founders, the builders, the brothers. Eldros raised his voice. "Men and women of the valley," he said, "today we stand inside the first hall of our future." The room fell silent. "We came here with nothing. We built with our hands, we fought with our lives, and now we stand in a home that will outlive us." Vandric stepped forward. "This hall is more than wood and stone." Hadrin added, "It's sweat." Vandros added, "It's strategy." Sovereign added, "It's unity." Eldros finished, "It's the circle." The hall erupted in cheers. The raising of the banner. Outside, the entire valley gathered as Eldros and Vandric carried the lion banner to the top of the hall. The wind picked up. The sun broke through the clouds. The valley held its breath. Eldros tied the banner to the highest beam. Vandric secured the final knot. Together, they stepped back. The banner unfurled. The lion roared across the valley, black thread on deep red cloth snapping in the wind like a living thing. The people cheered. The knights raised their swords. The children shouted with joy. Hadrin whispered, "Now it feels real." Vandros nodded. "Now it begins." Sovereign bowed his head. "Now we stand." Eldros looked at the banner, the symbol of everything they had built. "Now," he said, "we are home." The sun set on the valley. As evening fell, the valley glowed with firelight. The walls cast long shadows. The hall stood tall against the darkening sky. The people ate, laughed, and lived, truly lived, for the first time since the kingdom fell. Eldros walked to the ridge overlooking the valley. Vandric joined him, silent. The wind carried the sound of the village, their village, below. Vandric spoke first. "You did it." Eldros shook his head. "We did it." Vandric smirked. "You're stubborn, and you talk too much." "True." They stood together, watching the valley breathe. Hadrin joined them, then Vandros, then Sovereign. The circle stood shoulder to shoulder, looking down at the home they had forged from nothing. Eldros placed his hand over his heart. "No man stands alone." The others repeated it. "No man stands alone." The sun dipped behind the ridges. The valley fell into peaceful night. And the Lion's Hall, the heart of their future, stood unbroken.